Welcome to the introductory video for iPassport on the change control module. We're just going to log into the system and take a look at the change control module and the features available within this. The change control module can be found under quality management as the main menu item and change control. When you go to the change control area, you can see the change control requests search function. This allows you to look across all pending and previous change controls. You can see the status down here. You have the ability to search and configure this search to export the results and trend information on change control. The easiest way to see the change control function is to actually create a new change control record. You can see here I've got access to a few OUs, so I'm going to select the one for virology where this change control request is taking place. There is an index function here. This is set to auto-generate, although it can be adjusted within administration and settings. I also need a title, both of which are required here. We can see requested on and requested by both required fields as well. The requested on allows us to go back in time, so it doesn't have to be added at the time of the request itself. So we could say it was the 15th here. Equally, the requested by doesn't have to be the person logged in. This means that it can act more as an administrative function. So here we can say that Jack was the person that actually requested this. Ideally, people would come into iPassport and log it directly, or use the external input form and have that contact iPassport. But equally, this allows for a transition period between perhaps a paper-based change control process and an iPassport-based one. We can add a change owner. This is the person, much like a document owner in the document control module, that receives updates and information about this change control request as it goes through its various stages. We can also categorize this to allow us to search for this and report on particular types of change control request. We're going to select a process item here, but you can see you can add additional items over here using the spanner icon. And then finally, we need to add a description that explains what this change control request is actually about. Here you can see our new change control request. You can see this is currently awaiting triage, so we'll cover that in just a moment. But what we can do prior to that, before it is actually triaged and reviewed to decide whether this is something we should actually go through, we can expand the record to give them a little bit more information. So why is this needed, for example? Well, we would like to improve the turnaround time there. So very simple one in this instance. What's our rollback plan? In case everything goes wrong, how do we fix this? Well, that's quite simple. The immediate rollback plan would clearly be to return to the manual method in this instance. Then we've got a couple of options saying risk of doing and risk of not doing. So we're starting to think about the risks involved here. And that then feeds into the overall risk area. So we just need to have a little think about what the risk of doing this would be and what the risk of not doing this would be. So the risk of not doing perhaps could be something along the lines of we're unable to meet our turnaround targets from there. Whereas the risk of doing this perhaps could be greater expense, more reagents that are required. So we can fill those in. The risk of not doing. Okay, so we're going to do a couple of simple ones here. That then allows us to think more about the overall risk. So the risk impacts, positive and negative, which then allow us to, again, think more about the consequence and likelihood and the overall risk associated with this. So we're going to look at risk impacts here. This is populated by you. This is a custom field, and you can add to it using the spanner icon here. Once added, those risks, both positive and negative, are available for selection for future use. So here we can see, well, there could be a cost increase, that's a negative from there. There could also be a cost decrease if we think about this in terms of staff though, because we're actually moving to a more automated system, and that would be a positive from there. We can also see quicker turnaround time, that would be a positive as well for us. So we can save those. And now we can use all of that information to put into our risk matrix to give us an overall risk level here. So risk consequence and risk likelihood. The areas within the risk matrix can be configured within administration and settings. So you can change the names of risk consequences and likelihoods, you can change the selectable items, and you can change the value and the calculation behind there. This all updates the overall risk matrix, so it can be customized by OU. So within iPassport, if different OUs are working to different methods, it is entirely possible for them to be configured differently within the system there. So we're going to select our consequence. We think the consequence of moving here, considering everything, is going to be low from there, or low 3, and the likelihood of anything going disastrously wrong with this is unlikely for us. So there we go. That gives us an overall score of 12, which in our settings means low, and you can see that's now highlighted on the risk matrix there. We've got risk mitigation as well. So what helps to mitigate the risks involved here? Well, the obvious mitigation here is there's a manual method we can still work with. Of course, another risk mitigation could be that there is another machine available that would assist us with that, although that might increase the cost of the overall project. Okay, so that means this has now been completed, and we've got a basic understanding of what it is, why it's needed, the risks involved, the positive and negative possible impacts there. And that allows us to then triage this. As I'm in the system and I'm set up to be one of the owners here, I get the ability to triage this. So we can see triage option there. I'm going to click this button and I'm going to say it's triage today. I don't want to reject. I think we should move forward with this. So we're actually just going to add the triage comments. There we go. And who do I want to actually implement this? So we're actually going to select Arthur here. And when do we want to implement it by? Well, we're going to say probably the 3rd of July here, and we can approve that. And what will happen is our workflow will update. So you can now see that triage has been completed by me, and it's now moved on to Arthur to implement this. And if we scroll down, we'll be able to see in the triage section, the triaged by, triaged on, comments associated with that. And then in the implementation section, this has been populated as well from there. So Arthur will get a task to actually implement this, and when he's done that, he can either come here from the task or go directly to the change control and click implement. I can see this because I've got high level access to the system and am the owner of this particular change, so I can override this should I wish. Once this has been implemented, we could consider a review of this as well. So if we look down at our change control request, we've got the option to say whether a follow-up review is required following its implementation. And I think it would be a good idea in this instance to conduct one. So if we say save, we can then say who needs to review this. Well, I think Jack can actually partake in this for us from there. And the review due is going to be a little bit in the future. So we need to give it a few weeks to actually run this implementation. So we're going to go for the end of July here. So at the end of July, Jack will get a task, and that will be automated. iPassport will send this out when it gets closer to the date to say, can you review this once the implementation is complete? Once he's reviewed that, he can provide feedback to the system. And finally, we can say whether we want additional verification or not. So I'm going to say yes here. And what that means is when the implementation is complete, the review is complete, it will then come to me for final verification as well. So I'll get another task once that review is complete to say, can we verify this? And did we accept it? Were we happy with it? And so on from there. And that then allows us to go through the full change cycle. And this is all implemented up at the top here in our workflow. So it's a clear understanding of where we are with a particular change at any time. Obviously, you have the other functions of assigning additional tasks to this, adding attachments, so supporting evidence, and linking this to other records within the system, should you need to. So you can provide information across all of the other modules within iPassport. We're now just going to log out briefly as myself and log in as Arthur so we can actually see that implementation task. So we've logged in as Arthur now, and we can see he's got a number of tasks available here. So we're going to look down at his change control, and he's got this task here for change to automated Western blot using the AutoBlot 3000. If we click on that, it will take us directly to the record. He can view the change control implementation request, who requested the original thing, who triaged this, it was me, the comments associated with it, and he can still review the other information. Now, typically he would have conducted the trial here, would have implemented the machine. We would expect at this stage for there to be documentation to be attached to this change control as well. And if everything went forward, we would then implement this. So we can actually say, okay. And in doing that, Arthur has now completed the implementation phase, and it will now wait for Jack to complete the review. And once he's completed that, it will come to me again to perform the verification of this. And so we can still add attachments and supporting evidence to this file at any time. Thank you.